He had never been beaten, never knocked down, never even bled. Then came a human who didn't even warm up. I have been covering combat sports for 347 cycles across 62 different systems, and I thought I had seen everything. I really did. My name is Carl, senior correspondent for the Galactic Sports Network, and let me tell you, nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened on Station Zenith 7 during the 43rd Annual Galactic Combat Exhibition. The arena was packed. And when I say packed, I mean 17,000 beings from 109 different species crammed into a facility designed for 12,000. Fire codes. What fire codes? Nobody cared. This was the event of the solar cycle. The energy in that dome was electric, chaotic, and honestly a little bit terrifying. Vendors were hawking protein slurries and fermented beverages at criminal prices. The smell was a nauseating mixture of anticipation, sweat from at least 40 different biological compositions, and whatever the Glorpians consider food. Spoiler alert, it is not food. The main attraction? Thexthor the Unbreakable, champion of the Krillian Empire. Undefeated in 234 consecutive matches. 234. The guy had never even been knocked down, let alone beaten. He stood at 8 feet of pure scaled muscle, with arm ridges that could deflect plasma bolts, and a jaw that looked like it could bite through hull plating. His species, the Krillians, were basically engineered for combat. Dense bone structure, redundant organ systems, reaction times that made most other species look like they were moving through syrup. And pompous? Oh, stars above. Was this guy pompous? Thexthor did not just enter the arena. No. He arrived with a full processional, banners, drummers, some kind of smoke machine that kept malfunctioning and making everyone in the front rows cough. He wore this ridiculous ceremonial armor that served absolutely no purpose except to show off his sponsor logos, which, by the way, included a protein supplement company that was under investigation for causing liver failure in 3 species. Class act, this one. The rules of the exhibition were simple, or so everyone thought. 2 fighters, unarmed combat only, no weapons, no enhancements, no external aid. First to submit, lose consciousness, or suffer catastrophic injury loses. Standard stuff. We had all watched this format for decades. The Krillians usually dominated because, well, nature had basically handed them a cheat code for physical confrontation. But this cycle was different. The Galactic Council, in their infinite wisdom and ongoing effort to pretend they valued diversity, had opened the tournament to newer species. Species that had only recently achieved interstellar travel, species that most of the established civilizations considered, shall we say, adorable, harmless, quaint little creatures who were good at making music and building things but certainly not built for actual combat. Species like humans. Now, I had done my research on humans. Everyone had. They were the talk of the station. These bizarre little primates from a death world they called Earth, who somehow managed to duct tape their way into space travel despite having the most fragmented planetary government anyone had ever seen. They were squishy. No natural armor, no claws, no venom, no redundant organs, no enhanced healing. They were basically held together by optimism and spite. Their military reputation came entirely from their absolutely unhinged approach to warfare, which mostly involved strapping themselves to explosives or building bigger and more creative weapons. The conventional wisdom shared by every single betting house on Zenith 7 was that humans could not fight unarmed. They were tool users. Without their guns, their missiles, their frankly disturbing enthusiasm for nuclear options, they were just fragile little creatures who would get absolutely demolished by any proper combat species. I believed it. Everyone believed it. The betting odds reflected it. You could get 1,000 to 1 return if you bet on the human. 1,000 to 1. Bookies were practically begging people to throw money away on the human fighter. Then she walked in. Corporal Jenna Reeves. Human. Female. 5 feet and 7 inches tall, which I am told is average for her species. Maybe 140 pounds. Brown hair pulled back in a simple tail. Wearing standard issue combat fatigues with the sleeves rolled up. No entrance music. No pyrotechnics. No ceremonial anything. She just walked through the tunnel, looked around the arena like she was mildly interested in the architecture, and started doing these little stretching movements, rolling her neck, rotating her shoulders, shaking out her hands. The crowd did not know whether to laugh or feel insulted on Thor's behalf. Here was this unstoppable champion standing in full glory, and his opponent looked like she had just finished her shift and wandered into the wrong room. She was not scared. She was not excited. She was not even particularly focused. She looked, and this is the honest truth, bored. Like this was a minor inconvenience interrupting her afternoon. Vexthor naturally took this as a personal insult. He started his traditional pre-fight ritual, which involved a lot of chest beating, roaring, and making threatening gestures. He was trying to intimidate her. Standard psychological warfare. It works on most species. The prey instinct kicks in. The opponent gets nervous, makes mistakes. Jenna yawned. Actually yawned. Covered her mouth and everything like she was trying to be polite about it. The referee, a three-eyed skeleton named High Arbiter Conrix, looked between them with what I can only describe as deep concern. He had presided over 400 matches and had never seen such a mismatch. This was going to be a slaughter. The only question was how quickly it would end, and whether the human would require immediate medical intervention or just, a body bag. Conrix went through the standard warnings. No biting of vital areas, no eye gouging, no attacks to reproductive organs. Keep it clean. Keep it honorable. He asked both fighters if they understood. Vexthor bellowed his agreement, flexing his arm ridges. Jenna just nodded, still looking around the arena like she was counting the exits. The crowd was going insane, chanting Vexthor's name. Some of the more bloodthirsty species were literally drooling at the prospect of watching a human get absolutely destroyed. I admit, I had my recorder set to capture what I assumed would be a cautionary tale about hubris and the dangers of letting unprepared species into professional combat sports. The betting windows closed. Final odds, 1,200 to 1 against the human. 3 beings in the entire station had bet on Jenna Reeves. 3. And rumor had it, 2 of them were humans themselves, probably supporting their own out-of-species loyalty and delusion. Conrix raised his primary appendage. The arena fell silent. 17,000 beings held their collective breath. This was it. The moment where reality would reassert itself and everyone would remember why the Krillians were called the Unbreakable. His appendage dropped. The fight began. And that, my friends, is where everything I thought I knew about combat went directly into the waste recycler. Before the actual fight started, there was the traditional pre-combat interview segment. Where fighters talk trash and build hype for the audience. Standard entertainment procedure. The arena's hollow screens flickered to life, projecting both fighters in split-screen format so everyone could see their faces. Well, Vexthor's face in the vague region where humans keep their facial features. Vexthor went first, naturally. Champions always go first. He leaned into the camera drone, his scaled face filling the screen's teeth on full display. "This is embarrassing," he roared, and the crowd erupted in laughter. "The council sends me a human. A soft skin. What am I supposed to do? Try not to kill it too quickly." More laughter. He was working the crowd like a professional. These pathetic creatures cannot fight without their precious weapons. Strip away their guns and their bombs and what do you have? Meat. Weak, fragile, breakable meat. The audience loved it. Absolutely ate it up. Chants of meat, meat, meat started in the Krillian section and spread like a virus. I saw currency changing hands everywhere as more bets piled onto Vexthor. The odds jumped to 1,500 to 1. The bookies were getting nervous. Too much money on one side. But what could they do? This was not a fight. This was going to be an execution. The camera drone swiveled to Jenna. She looked directly into the lens with the same expression someone might have when stuck in a slow-moving queue at a government office. "Yeah, okay," she said flatly. That was it. 2 words. She did not elaborate. Did not engage, just acknowledged that sounds had been made in her general direction. The interviewer, a Palaxian with excellent feathers and terrible instincts, tried to prompt her. "Do you have any response to Champion Vexthor's claims about human frailty?" Jenna scratched her neck. "I mean, he is not wrong about the meat thing. We are technically meat. So is he, though. Pretty sure everyone here is some variation of organic tissue, right?" She looked genuinely confused, like she was trying to work through the logic. "Is this species-specific or a general biology statement? Because I feel like the insult needs clarification." Vexthor's face flushed a deeper shade of green. You could see it even through his scales. "You dare mock me, human?" "No, I am genuinely asking," Jenna replied, completely straight-faced. "Are you calling me meat because humans are meat, or because meat is bad? Because if meat is bad, then you are also insulting yourself, which seems counterproductive." I could see the champion's jaw muscles twitching. This was not going how he expected. Vexthor was used to fear, to desperate bravado, to opponents trying to talk themselves up before he crushed them. He was not used to someone treating his threats like a philosophical debate requiring peer review. Let me explain something about Krillian physiology because it is relevant. These beings are purpose-built for combat. Their bones are twice as dense as standard humanoid species. Their muscle fibers are layered in redundant bundles, meaning even if you damage one layer, there are two more underneath still functioning. Those arm ridges I mentioned? Those are not decorative. They are calcified bone plates that can stop most kinetic weapons. Their reaction time is 0.03 seconds faster than a human's. They heal from injuries that would kill most species. They have a secondary circulatory system that kicks in if the primary gets damaged. Evolution, or possibly some ancient genetic tampering, had turned them into living weapons, and Vexthor was the best of them. He could bench press a small transport vehicle. His punches had been measured at 9,000 newtons of force. He once fought for 17 hours straight against 4 opponents simultaneously, and won. The guy was legitimately unstoppable by any conventional measure. So when he growled, "I will break every bone in your fragile body before I allow you to submit," it was not trash talk. It was a statistical probability. Jenna nodded slowly. Cool. Hey, quick question. Does your medical insurance cover career-ending injuries? Because you might want to check on that before we start. The crowd went silent. You could have heard a quantum fluctuation. Did this human just threaten the unbreakable? Did she just imply that she was going to injure him? The audacity was breathtaking. The delusion was clinical. I actually felt embarrassed for her species. Vexthor laughed, not a chuckle, a full booming laugh that echoed through the arena. You? Injure me? Oh, this will be entertaining. I have fought Zorathian berserkers. I have battled Diraxian war forms. I have defeated opponents with acid blood and molecular claws, and you little soft skin, you think you can harm me? I mean, statistically speaking, yeah. Jenna said, examining her fingernails. Probability favors it happening. But hey, you have got your beliefs. I have got mine. Let us see whose math works out better. High Arbiter Konrik stepped between them, his 3 eyes blinking in rapid succession. This was unusual behavior for a referee. They are trained to remain neutral and motionless. But even he seemed concerned. Corporal Reeves, he said carefully, I must ask if you understand the physical disparity between your species and the Krillian physiology. There is no shame in forfeit. You can withdraw now and— I am good. Thanks, Jenna interrupted, still not looking particularly interested. Can we just get this started? I have got a card game at 1900 hours and I do not want to be late. Conrix's middle eye twitched. I had never seen that before. Very well. Both fighters, take your positions. They moved to opposite sides of the combat circle. Vexthor dropped into his traditional stance, low and powerful, arms spread wide ready to grapple or strike. It was a stance perfected over centuries of Krillian combat doctrine. Efficient, terrifying, proof. Jenna just stood there, hands loose at her sides, weight evenly distributed. She looked like she was waiting for a public transport to arrive. Not tense, not coiled, just present in the most minimal way possible. The final betting surge happened. People were literally throwing currency at the bookies. A Glorpian merchant mortgaged his ship to put everything on Vexthor winning in under 30 seconds. A group of Tharixians bet their entire clan's quarterly earnings on a first-round knockout. The humans in the audience, all 12 of them, sat quietly in their section looking completely relaxed. One was reading a book, an actual physical book. During the fight of the cycle, Conrix raised his appendage one final time. Fighters ready? Vexthor roared his affirmation, slamming his fists together hard enough to create a small shockwave. Jenna gave a tiny thumbs-up gesture which I later learned was a human sign of approval, though in this context it seemed more like mild acknowledgement of being addressed. The appendage hovered in the air. The crowd leaned forward. My recorder was running at maximum resolution. This was history in the making. The moment when humanity learned a hard lesson about physical limitations and the proper pecking order of galactic species, the appendage dropped, and everything went wrong in the best possible way. The bell rang. Actually, it was more of a resonant gong that vibrated through the entire arena structure. But you get the idea. The fight was officially on. Vexthor exploded forward with the kind of speed that should not be possible for something his size. I am talking 0 to terrifying in 0.4 seconds. His feet hammered the arena floor hard enough to crack the reinforced plating. This was his signature opening move, the one that had started every single one of his 234 victories. The Krillian Meteor, they called it. Close the distance instantly, eliminate the opponent's reaction time, end the fight before it really begins. He covered the 20-foot gap between them in less time than it takes to blink. His right arm came up in that classic overhead strike, the one that had caved in skulls, shattered armor and ended careers. The arm ridges on his forearm caught the arena lights, gleaming. 9,000 newtons of force, accelerating downward, aimed directly at Jenna's head. If that connected, they would be scraping her off the floor with specialized equipment. The crowd was already cheering. This was it. The expected outcome. The natural order reasserting itself. I had my recorder focused on the impact point, ready to capture the moment for the highlight reels. Honestly, I was already composing the obituary in my head. Human fighter, brave but foolish. Learned the hard way that courage is not a substitute for biological advantage. Then Jenna moved. Not backward, not to the side, forward. She stepped into Vexthor's charge, which made absolutely no sense from any tactical standpoint I had ever studied. You do not move toward the oncoming freight train. You get out of the way of the oncoming freight train. This is basic survival instinct shared by every sentient species with a functioning nervous system. But she moved forward, and slightly to her left, and her hands came up faster than my eyes could track. One hand grabbed Vexthor's incoming wrist, the other hand went to his elbow, and then she dropped her body weight, twisted her hips in this sharp rotational movement, and did something with her positioning that I still cannot fully explain even after watching the replay 300 times. Vexthor's arm kept moving in the direction it was going. Momentum is momentum. Physics is physics. But Jenna had changed the angle, changed the leverage point. His arm was no longer moving where his brain expected it to move. His wrist was rotating in a direction that wrists are not supposed to rotate, with all of his own body weight and forward momentum adding to the pressure. The sound happened before the visual registered. Crack. Not a small crack. Not a twig snapping. This was the sound of structural failure, of bone giving up, of cartilage surrendering. It echoed through the arena like a gunshot, picked up by every audio sensor and amplified through the speaker system. Sharp, wet, final. Vexthor's overhead strike stopped mid-swing, just froze in the air, his fist still clenched, but going absolutely nowhere. His wrist had bent at an angle that would make a geometry teacher weep. I could see bone pressing against the scales from the inside. His hand was pointing in a direction that was roughly 45 degrees off from where hands are supposed to point. The champion's eyes went wide, his mouth opened, and then he screamed. Oh stars. The screaming. I have heard sounds across 100 worlds. Battle cries, death wails, mating calls that could strip paint. Nothing, and I mean nothing compared to the sound that came out of Vexthor at that moment. It was not just pain, it was shock, betrayal, the fundamental dismantling of reality. This was not supposed to happen. This could not happen. He was the unbreakable. Jenna let go of his arm and stepped back, her expression unchanged. Still bored, still mildly inconvenienced, like she had just completed a routine task that required minimal effort. She did not celebrate, did not gloat, just created distance and waited to see what would happen next. Vexthor dropped to his knees, cradling his destroyed wrist against his chest. The screaming continued. His entire body was shaking. The arm ridges that were supposed to protect him had done absolutely nothing because the attack had not come from outside. She had used his own structure against him, turned his strength into a weakness, made his momentum the weapon. The arena was silent except for the screaming. 17,000 beings sat in absolute shock, jaws hanging open, eyes wide, appendages frozen mid-gesture. The vendors stopped hawking. The bookies stopped taking bets. Everyone just stared at the impossible thing that had just happened in front of them. I checked my chronometer. 0.9 seconds. That is how long the fight had lasted. Less than 1 full second from the opening bell to the career-ending injury of the galaxy's most dominant combat champion. 0.9 seconds to completely shatter every assumption about human fragility and combat capability. High Arbiter Kenrick stood there with all 3 eyes blinking out of sync, which is a clear sign of cognitive system overload in his species. He looked at Vexthor, looked at Jenna, looked at his own appendages. Like they might have the answers. The referee training manual does not cover this scenario. There is no protocol for champion destroyed before throwing a single successful strike. The medical team rushed onto the floor. 6 Palaxian medics with their emergency equipment, moving fast. They surrounded Vexthor's scanners out, already pumping pain suppressors into his system. I could hear their frantic communications. Compound fracture, multiple bone fragments, ligament complete separation, possible nerve damage. Get the regeneration pod ready. This is catastrophic. Catastrophic. That word hung in the air like smoke. Jenna rolled her shoulders again, that same stretching movement from before. So, is that it? Or, she called out to the referee. Her voice was casual, conversational, like she was asking if there was more paperwork to fill out. Conrix's translator struggled with his response. He was speaking 3 languages at once, his brain apparently unable to commit to just one. For fight. The champion. Medical forfeit. You. One of the medics, a senior trauma specialist named Yopex, looked up from treating Vexthor with an expression of pure horror. What did you do to him? She demanded, staring at Jenna like she was looking at some kind of monster wearing a human skin. Jenna shrugged. Kote Geishi. Basic wrist lock. He was throwing a pretty telegraphed overhead strikes. So I just redirected the energy and applied rotational pressure to the joint. Standard disarm technique. She said this like she was explaining how to open a door. Simple. Obvious. Nothing special. Standard? Yilpex repeated, her voice climbing several octaves. You destroyed a Krellian combat champion's primary striking limb in under 1 second with a standard technique. I mean, I have only been training for like 3 years, so my form is probably sloppy, Jenna admitted, looking genuinely apologetic. A black belt would have done it cleaner. Black belt. I made a note to research what that term meant. It sounded ominous. Vexthor had stopped screaming, mostly because the pain suppressors had kicked in and his brain was achieving chemical unconsciousness. The medics were loading him onto a hover stretcher, handling his arm with extreme care. His wrist looked like something from a horror simulation. I have seen battle damage. I have seen industrial accidents. This was worse because it was so precise, so targeted. One joint, completely and professionally destroyed. The crowd found its voice again. Not cheering, not booing, just noise, confusion given sound. Thousands of beings trying to process what their eyes had just witnessed. The impossible made real, the unthinkable made routine. I looked at my recorder, checked the footage, played it back in slow motion, watched Jenna's hands move with absolute precision, every finger placement perfect, every weight shift calculated. This was not luck, this was not accident, this was skill, refined, practiced, devastatingly effective skill, and she called it basic. The betting houses were in chaos. I could see bookies screaming into communicators, audiences demanding explanations, money changing hands in reverse as people tried to call back bets that had already settled. Somewhere, 3 beings who had bet on the human were about to become very, very wealthy. High Arbiter Kunrix finally managed to speak in just one language. Winner by medical forfeit, Corporal Jenna Reeves of Earth. The announcement fell flat. No one cheered. No one celebrated. Everyone just sat there trying to reconcile their understanding of reality with what had just occurred on the arena floor. Jenna gave that little thumbs-up gesture again and started walking toward the exit tunnel. The real education was about to begin. The medical bay doors slammed shut behind Vexthor's hover stretcher, and I could hear the emergency regeneration pod powering up. Chief Medical Officer Talvrin emerged 15 minutes later, looking like she had aged several cycles in the span of one shift. Her face was grim. I caught her in the corridor, recorder running, because this was still a story even if it was rapidly becoming a nightmare. Chief Talvrin, what is the prognosis for Champion Vexthor? She stared at me with the kind of exhaustion that comes from having your expertise questioned by reality itself. 17 separate fractures, complete detachment of the scapholunate ligament, severed median nerve. The carpal bones are essentially powder. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. His fighting career is over. Even with our best regeneration technology, he will never regain full function in that wrist. The damage is too precise, too comprehensive. Whoever taught that human to do that knew exactly which structures to destroy for maximum permanent effect. Career over. The unbreakable, broken. Permanently. I thanked her and headed straight for the station's information archives because I needed answers and I needed them immediately. The search term human unarmed combat returned 63,000 results. 63,000. I started reading, and the more I read, the more my secondary stomach began churning with something that felt uncomfortably like dread. Humans have been fighting each other hand to hand for their entire existence as a species. Thousands of years. They developed hundreds of distinct martial arts systems, each one refined through generations of practice, competition, and actual warfare. Boxing, wrestling, Muay Thai, Judo, Karate, Sambo, Krav Maga. The list went on, each name representing centuries of accumulated knowledge about how to destroy another being without weapons. And then I found it, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The thing Jenna had mentioned. My translator struggled with the concept, initially. A martial art specifically designed around the principle that a smaller, weaker opponent can defeat a larger, stronger one through proper technique and leverage. It focused on joint manipulation, chokes, and positional control. Practitioners trained by actually fighting each other, full resistance, hundreds of hours per year. They had competitions, rankings, a whole culture built around the scientific application of physics to the structural weaknesses of humanoid anatomy. The Kote-gashi technique Jenna had used, that was from a different system called Aikido, which was itself derived from older Japanese combat methods. The technique was over a century old, refined, tested, proven effective through literally millions of repetitions by practitioners across Earth. She had used ancient publicly available knowledge to destroy a galactic champion in less time than it takes to process a payment transaction. I stumbled out of the archives in a daze, right into a mob of extremely agitated aliens. The station's main concourse had turned into something between a protest and a panic attack. Representatives from 24 combat federations were screaming at Galactic Combat Commission officials. Bookies were demanding regulatory intervention. Professional fighters were huddled in groups, watching replay footage on handheld devices with expressions of existential horror. A Thoraxian battlemaster named Krelix grabbed my shoulder with enough force to leave bruises. "You are a journalist. You have access. What else can they do? What other techniques do humans have?" His voice was desperate, terrified. This was a being who had won 40 consecutive death matches, and he sounded like a child afraid of the dark. Apparently hundreds? I managed. Maybe thousands? The archives are extensive and I am pretty sure I only scratched the surface. Thousands of ways to do what she did. Another voice shouted from the crowd, Acrylian scales pale with shock. No, I corrected, checking my notes. Thousands of distinct martial arts systems. Each one contains dozens or hundreds of individual techniques, and they teach these to their military, to their police forces, to their children, as recreational activities. It is embedded in their culture. The crowd went silent. You could hear the ventilation systems humming. Someone's beverage container hit the floor and nobody even looked. Recreational, someone repeated weakly. They teach children to do this. For fun. I nodded, still scrolling through my research. There are human younglings who train in these arts from age 5 or 6. By the time they reach physical maturity, some have 15 years of experience, and apparently, Corporal Reeves started training as an adult, which means she is, and I am quoting her exact words here, just a beginner. 3 years of training and she is a beginner? Krelix looked like he might vomit. What can their experts do? That was an excellent question. A horrifying question. A question I desperately did not want answered through live demonstration. The commission officials were trying to restore order, but they looked as shaken as everyone else. Commissioner Valthorin, a normally composed skeleton administrator, was frantically consulting with his legal team. I caught fragments of their conversation, words like unfair biological advantage, concealed capabilities, and potential ban on human participants pending investigation. That is when Jenna walked by, heading toward the commissary with 2 other humans. She had changed out of her combat fatigues into casual clothes. She was laughing at something one of her companions said, completely relaxed, like she had not just ended a legendary career and triggered a galaxy-wide crisis about combat sports regulations. I rushed over. Recorder extended. Corporal Reeves, can I ask you a few questions? She stopped, looking mildly surprised to be recognized. Sure. I guess. What is up? Your technique against Champion Vexthor. You said you have been training for 3 years. Is that, how would I phrase this? Is that considered a long time in human martial arts? She laughed. Actually laughed. 3 years? No man, I am a white belt. Well, technically 2-stripe white belt, as of last month, but still. I am terrible. My instructor would be embarrassed if he saw that technique. My elbow positioning was way off. White belt. 2 stripes. I made frantic notes. And what would someone with more experience be capable of? Jenna thought about it, tilting her head. I mean, a black belt could have done that without injuring him, if they wanted to. Better control, you know. They could have just locked the joint and made him tap out. I kind of panicked when he charged and just went for the break because I figured stopping him fast was safer than trying to be gentle. She said this like she was apologizing for being rude at a dinner party. How long does it take to achieve this black belt status? I asked, my voice barely steady. In BJJ? Usually 8 to 10 years of consistent training, but that is just where the real learning starts. According to my coach, he has been training for 23 years and he says he is still learning new things every session. 23 years of learning how to dismantle opponents is a recreational hobby. One of her companions, a tall human male with graying hair, grinned at my expression. You should see what the MMA fighters can do, or the Krav Maga folks, or hell, any half-decent wrestler. Jenna here is a paper pusher who trains twice a week at the station gym. She is not even a serious practitioner. I really am not, Jenna agreed cheerfully. I just do it for the exercise, and because it is fun. Beats running on a treadmill, you know? Fun. Exercise. Recreational activity. These words kept coming up, and each time they did, my understanding of human capability shifted further into terrifying territory. So, hypothetically, I said carefully, if the commission were to continue allowing human participation in combat sports, and a human who was a serious practitioner were to compete, what would that look like? The 3 humans exchanged glances. The kind of glances that contain entire conversation. Honestly, Jenna said, probably best not to find out. The combat sports community back on Earth has been watching this tournament. There has been a lot of chatter on the forums about how the rules favor strength over technique. If you guys open this up, you are going to get actual competitors showing up, people who live and breathe this stuff. And that would be bad, I said. Not a question, a statement. For everyone else? Yeah, probably, the male human confirmed. No offense to your champions, but they are basically untrained brawlers relying on physical advantages. That works great until you run into someone who knows how to negate physical advantages. Then it is just target practice. Target practice. He said it so casually. Like Vexathor had not been a 234-time undefeated champion. Like everything we thought we knew about combat was not fundamentally childish compared to what humans had spent millennia developing. Jenna checked her chronometer. Hey, I gotta run. Card game starts in 20 minutes and I am not missing it. Nice talking to you. She waved and headed off, leaving me standing there with my recorder and my shattered assumptions. Behind me I could hear the crowd's anxiety building. The questions. The fear. The sudden, terrible understanding that humanity had been categorized wrong from the beginning. We thought they were tool users who could not fight unarmed. Turns out, they were fighters who sometimes used tools. The difference was about to reshape galactic combat sports forever. The Galactic Combat Commission called an emergency session 6 hours after the incident. I say incident because nobody wanted to call it a fight. Fights imply some level of competitive exchange. What happened to Vexthor was more like a professional dismantling masquerading as a sporting event. The commission chamber was packed beyond capacity. Delegates from every major combat federation, insurance representatives, legal teams, medical experts, and about 40 extremely nervous bookies all crammed into a space designed for maybe half that number. Commissioner Valthorin looked like he had not slept, which was accurate because his species does not actually sleep, but the exhaustion was evident in every movement. Order! I will have order, he shouted, banging his gavel hard enough to crack the podium. The room settled into anxious silence. We are here to address the human question and determine appropriate regulatory responses to today's events. The human question. It had become a thing now. A proper political issue requiring committees and subcommittees, and probably several cycles of debate. I watched from the press gallery, recorder running, documenting what was rapidly becoming the biggest story of my career. A Krillian delegate stood first, his scales still pale. My government demands immediate suspension of all human participants pending full investigation into concealed combat capabilities. What we witnessed was not a fight. It was an execution using techniques that were never disclosed during the registration process. Corporal Reeves filled out all required forms, countered the human delegation leader, a stern woman named Admiral Chen. She listed her combat training accurately. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 3 years experience, white belt rank. Everything was documented according to your protocols. It is not humanity's fault that your screening process failed to investigate what those terms actually meant. The room erupted in arguments. I caught fragments over the noise. Unfair advantage. Should have researched. Our champions are retiring. Your champions were unprepared. The betting house representative, a Glorpian named Tixwell who looked like he had been crying, stood with shaking appendages. 17 betting establishments have declared bankruptcy in the last 4 hours. The odds were calculated based on established physical metrics. No one, and I mean no one, predicted that a human could defeat a Krillian champion in under 1 second. The entire gambling infrastructure of this station is collapsing. Good, I thought privately. Maybe you should have done actual research instead of making assumptions based on muscle density and bone structure. Commissioner Valthoran pulled up a holographic display showing the fight from 6 different angles. Let us review what actually occurred with expert analysis. He gestured to a biomechanics specialist named Dr. Rennick, who looked deeply uncomfortable with the attention. Dr. Rennick cleared his throat. After extensive review, I can confirm that Corporal Reeves used a technique called Koti Geishi, which translates roughly to outside wrist turn. The mechanics are actually quite simple, which makes them terrifying. The hologram zoomed in, showing Jenna's hands in slow motion. She gripped Vex Thor's wrist with her lead hand, establishing a control point. Her rear hand secured his elbow, creating a leverage arm. Then she executed a hip rotation while dropping her center of gravity. The hologram showed it frame by frame, Jenna's body moving with practiced precision. Every joint angle optimized, every weight shift calculated. The critical element is that she used Vex Thor's own momentum against him. Dr. Rennick continued. He was charging forward with approximately 9,000 newtons of force. She did not try to stop that force. She redirected it. The rotational torque applied to his wrist joint, combined with his forward momentum, exceeded the structural capacity of Krillian bone and connective tissue. The fracture was inevitable once she established the proper positioning. So she used physics, someone muttered from the audience. She weaponized physics, Dr. Rennick corrected. And she did it with a technique that humans have been refining for over a century. This is not improvisation. This is applied biomechanical science, tested through millions of repetitions across their entire species. They have taken the study of how to break bodies and turned it into recreational culture. The hologram shifted to show other techniques from the human martial arts archives. Joint locks, throws, chokes, strikes to nerve clusters, each one demonstrated with clinical precision. Each one capable of neutralizing opponents regardless of size or strength differential. How many of these techniques do they have? Asked a Theraxian combat master, his voice small. Dr. Rennick consulted his data pad. Difficult to quantify. Thousands, certainly. Perhaps tens of thousands, if you count variations and combinations. And they continue to develop new ones through active competition and cross-training between different martial arts systems. The room went quiet again. That special kind of quiet that happens when everyone simultaneously realizes they have made a catastrophic miscalculation. I left the chamber during a recess and headed to the human fighter quarters. If the commission was going to debate theory, I wanted practical perspectives. I found 6 human fighters gathered in a common area, watching news coverage of the emergency session on a wall screen. They were passing around some kind of fermented beverage and making jokes. "Excuse me," I said, stepping into the room. "I am Kixerl from the Galactic Sports Network. May I ask you a few questions?" A muscular human woman with scars on her knuckles grinned at me. "Sure, buddy. What do you want to know?" Is what Corporal Reeves did considered advanced technique in human combat training. The entire room burst into laughter. Not cruel laughter. Just genuine amusement. "Jenna did a basic wrist lock," said a lean male with multiple tattoos covering his arms. "That is literally white belt material. First-year stuff. My 10-year-old daughter can do a Kote Geishi. They teach it in the fundamentals class." "Your 10-year-old daughter," I repeated slowly, "could do what was done to champion Vex Thor. If someone charged at her with a big overhead strike? Yeah, probably. Might not get the break since she is still small, but she would definitely get the lock and the takedown." He said this with obvious pride. Parental affection for his child's ability to destroy joints. Humans were terrifying. Another fighter, older with gray in his beard, leaned forward. "Look, here is the thing you guys do not understand. Most species in the galaxy develop technology faster than they developed hand-to-hand combat skills. You went from primitive to spacefaring in, what, a few thousand years? You skipped the part where you spend 10,000 years fighting each other with your bare hands because you had not invented good weapons yet. Humans took the long route. The scarred woman added. We have been punching, grappling, and breaking each other for our entire existence. We got really, really good at it before we ever built a spacecraft. So when you strip away our technology, you are not leaving us helpless. You are just taking away the handicap we usually operate with to make things fair for everyone else. The tattooed man pulled up something on his personal device. Check this out. This is a competition from Earth, called ADCC, Advanced Submission Grappling. Watch this guy here, that is Gordon Ryan. He is a multiple-time champion. The video showed a human grappling match. I watched in growing horror as one competitor systematically dismantled another through a series of positions and techniques that flowed like water. Arm trapped, back taken, choke applied. The defeated competitor tapping frantically in submission. The whole sequence took maybe 90 seconds. That guy has probably 10,000 hours of mat time, the tattooed man said, and he is just one of hundreds at that level. Imagine if someone like him showed up to your tournament. What do you think would happen? I did not want to imagine it. The imagination was bad enough. So when Jenna said she was a beginner, I said carefully, she was being accurate, not modest. Completely accurate. The older fighter confirmed. She trains casually, twice a week, mostly for fitness. If the commission keeps this tournament open to humans, and word gets out that the competition is this soft, you are going to get actual killers showing up. People who train twice a day every day. People who compete internationally. People for whom fighting is not a hobby, it is an identity. The scarred woman raised her beverage container. And then your champions are going to learn what real martial arts look like. No offense to the big scaly guy, but charging forward with an overhead strike is something we teach beginners not to do in week 1. It is a gift, a present wrapped in ego and delivered directly to anyone with functional technique. I thanked them and left, my head spinning with implications. The commission could ban humans from competition, but that would just prove that the other species could not compete on equal terms. They could allow humans to continue, but that would mean watching champion after champion get systematically destroyed by beings they had dismissed as fragile and weak. There was no good option. Just different flavors of humiliation. I returned to the arena floor 3 hours later. The commission had made its decision. Human participation would continue, but with mandatory disclosure requirements and updated safety protocols. Translation: they were too proud to ban humans outright, but terrified of what would happen next. Jenna's next match was scheduled for the evening session. Her opponent was a Zarathian berserker named Kroloth, a 9-foot wall of muscle and rage who had won 73 consecutive fights. I watched him pace in his preparation area, psyching himself up, roaring at nothing. Then I checked the registration updates. Kroloth had withdrawn from the tournament. Medical reasons, the official statement said. Unofficial sources reported he had watched the Vexthor footage 40 times, and concluded that his career was worth more than his pride. 2 other fighters scheduled to face human opponents also withdrew. Then 5 more. Then 12. By the time evening arrived, 8 of Jenna's next 10 opponents had forfeited rather than face her. The human who could not possibly fight unarmed. The white belt beginner with 3 years of casual training. I found her in the commissary again, winning at cards against 3 other humans. She had a stack of currency chips in front of her, and was laughing at something someone said, completely unbothered by the chaos she had created, just existing in her moment, enjoying her evening, probably not even aware that she had fundamentally altered galactic combat sports forever. The final irony hit me as I compiled my report. Humans had been practicing unarmed combat for roughly 10,000 years. Most galactic species had been spacefaring for less than 5,000. Humanity had been perfecting the art of breaking each other hand to hand since before my ancestors discovered fire. We had not encountered a species that could not fight unarmed. We had encountered a species that had been fighting unarmed longer than we had been building starships. A species that treated the systematic study of violence as cultural heritage. A species that taught their children these techniques as bonding activities. And we had assumed they were weak because they did not have scales or claws or redundant organs. The assumption was going to cost the galactic combat community everything. Champions would retire, records would become meaningless, new safety regulations would emerge, betting houses would collapse, entire martial traditions would be exposed as inadequate. All because a bored corporal from Earth used a basic wrist lock on a champion who never saw it coming. I filed my report under the headline "The Day We Learned That Soft Does Not Mean Weak." 17,000 beings had watched Vexthor fall. Within a week, 17 million would watch the footage. Within a month, every combat federation in the galaxy would be desperately studying human martial arts, trying to adapt centuries of refined technique into their own training programs, but they were starting from behind, thousands of years behind. And somewhere on Station Zenith 7, Corporal Jenna Reeves, white belt with 2 stripes, was winning at cards and planning what to have for dinner. The new reality had arrived. We just had not accepted it yet. But we would, eventually, painfully. One broken wrist at a time.